Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sentinel. Today, I've got a pretty interesting episode for you, and I'm not quite sure where I stand on it, but let's just discuss it. So, as you all know, that I'm fairly active on YouTube. I'm also active on LinkedIn, and I stumbled across an article or a post that the Marine Forces Reserve put up there about a young second lieutenant, Rayuan Lane. Now, I just want to preface this. This is not about Rayuan Lane. As far as I'm concerned, he's a phenomenal officer, and I'm quite impressed by him. But this is about the policy. I'm reading this post, and it seems that this young second lieutenant is walking in through the halls of the Pentagon with the Secretary of Defense, and I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? Why is a second lieutenant hanging around the Secretary of Defense? Well, come to find out, he's a pretty phenomenal football player. He went to the Naval Academy. He graduated from there this past May, and then was drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars as a defensive back. And so I started, digging a little bit more because my son also went to the Naval Academy, and he had to serve 5 years on active duty. That was his commitment. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, how come Lieutenant Lane doesn't have to serve 5 years and he's been assigned to the reserves? So I started digging into that a little bit. And the reason I did was because this is preferential treatment. We've made a big hoopla about DEI and how corrosive it was to the military and to our warfighters because it gave preferential treatment based on race, gender, or sexual orientation. And now all of a sudden, we've got this, young stud athlete that's getting preferential treatment so he can go play football for the NFL while all the other graduates, and there's about 3,600 a year that we graduate from the three service academies, have to go serve their 5 years in the military as they're obligated to. So I left a couple of comments on this post, and it just blew up. I mean, people just started attacking me. Who the hell are you? Blah blah blah. Are you? Did you even serve? And all this horse shit, which is irrelevant to the discussion. The discussion's about policy, right? What's the policy? So Marfo Rez was kind enough to respond to my comments in a professional manner, and they said this is in accordance with Title 10 U.S. Code 8459 Bravo, which basically outlines the midshipman's service obligations, and it gives the Secretary of the Navy broad authorities over the midshipman. So, for example, a midshipman's obligated to serve 5 years in the military once they graduate from the service academy. That's a given. Now, what happens is if a midshipman doesn't graduate, the Secretary of the Navy has got broad authorities to take his service and put him in the Navy or the reserves as an enlisted person to recoup the benefits that he received from this education. Now, remember, in the past episodes, we've talked about that it costs roughly about $600,000 a year for each graduate, that comes out of these academies. So it's a lot of chunk of money that you and I as taxpayers are paying. And we expect their obligation in return, which is quite simply the 5 years. So I invited U.S. Marine Forces Reserves to come on the channel and talk to the viewers about their position on this issue. They elected not to. My son, as I said, had graduated from the US Naval Academy, and he did his 5-year commitment, as all graduates should do. That's the issue here. It's not about Second Lieutenant Lane. He seems like a wonderful young man, and I truly wish him the best. And I hope that he does become an infantry officer because we need studs like him to be in infantry. He's a big guy, about 5'11", 200 pounds, roughly my size. So he'd probably make a decent infantryman. And I hope he does do that. But the issue really is about the policy. Why should we make an exception for athletes when we stop making exceptions based on race, gender, and all that stuff? So Secretary of Defense, his main precept was that we're going to have one set of standards and one set of accountability. Well, in this case, it certainly is preferential treatment. And why should that happen? So what if a graduate from the Naval Academy wants to go to Hollywood and become an actor? Should we allow them to do that and defer their service? Or, let's say another graduate wants to go to medical school. Can they get out of their 5-year obligation and go off to medical school? No, that's a horse shit, right? Because you sign a contract and you got to live up to the contract. That's what we're all about. That's what honor, courage, and commitment's all about. But yet again, we are allowing individual preferences And I think that's wrong. And the military comes back and says, you know, he's doing this because it's really going to help the image of the military. It's going to help us with recruiting and whatnot. Well, I call horseshit on that, and I'll tell you why. Because the military is the one, the DoD has been, touting for the last several months that, hey, we're meeting our recruiting quotas and all this stuff. Well, if we're meeting our recruiting quotas, then why do we need, Second Lieutenant Lane out there not fulfilling his original commitment and then give us this bullshit line about, hey, he's going to help us with our recruiting. Well, if you're meeting your recruiting quotas already, you don't need help with recruiting. It's really that simple, isn't it? So I kept digging into this whole thing because Title 10, the paragraph they sent me didn't make any sense because it doesn't really give an allowance. Come to find out, in 2019, it was President Trump's executive order that gave athletes this preferential treatment. So that just blew, it just blew a gasket in my mind. So on the one hand, on his, so he's the 45th president then. Now when he's the 47th president, he's against DEI and all that stuff, and that's good. It's good for the military, but we still have this executive order out there. I don't even think Trump realizes that he has it. I've got mixed emotions about this, I want everybody to live their dreams, but they also sign a contract, and you have to fulfill the obligations of the contract and your responsibilities to the nation. The nation didn't pay for your college education for you to go play football for the Jaguars. The nation paid for your college education, and football happens to be part of it at the Naval Academy, but the nation also expects you to fulfill your commitment. That's what the agreement was, and people need to live up to their agreement. So that's the way I think. You may think differently, and I'd love to hear your comments about this because it's a controversial subject. It certainly is controversial. And, here's the other thing I don't get. Just because you challenge something, all of a sudden people come after you. Oh, who are you to challenge? I'm an American, first and foremost. But in their minds, because you don't agree with them, you have to serve in the military. You have to be a Marine. Otherwise, you can't challenge the policies of the Marine Corps. Well, that's bullshit, too, in my opinion. As an American, any American can challenge any policy, and this is the right that what gives us. Anybody to say that you can't challenge a policy is really going against the Constitution. And I don't have to prove my Marinehood to anybody, for that matter. I know who I am. The Marines that I serve with know who I am. And I don't need to tell some turd on LinkedIn and compare DD-214s and see who's got a bigger PP and all this happy horse shit. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please leave a comment. That's all I got. Stay rugged, stay united. Con out.